tired of stick people drawings stinking up your exercise programmes? Do you wish you had an exercise prescription software that had hundreds of pictures, videos, fully customisable text, inbuilt virtual consultation software, and you could send it by email or WhatsApp? If that software existed, I bet you'd want a 3-month free trial, wouldn't you? Just go to rehabmypatient.com/physiomatters now. Hello and welcome to YouMatter. In this episode, I'm talking to physiotherapist Tom Jacobs, who is still a practicing physio, but also owns a couple of physio clinics and runs an FCP service and lots of other things which he's going to describe to you in the introduction. But the reason I wanted to talk to Tom was really on the broad subject of well-being with those various hats and the two sides of the fence that he sits on, both as a clinician and someone who manages clinicians. You'll see when you listen to the episode, or you will hear in the episode, that we cover a lot of ground and dip into lots of different philosophies and things outside the clinical world and inside it. So I really hope you enjoy the conversation. I think it will have relevance whether you wear any of those hats, whether you're a clinician working in the NHS or private sector, whether you work for somebody else, and indeed whether you manage other people. So sit back and enjoy the conversation, and I'll be back at the end. Hello and welcome to the next edition of YouMatter, where I'm very pleased to welcome physiotherapist and clinic owner Tom Jacobs. Hi, Tom.
Hi, Joe.
Hi. So before I bring people on air, I often have a quick chat to them and make sure I've got all the details of the various things that they do correct. And the thing about Tom is there's quite a lot of them. And as we started adding to the list, I said, do you know what, Tom? I'm just going to let you introduce yourself and explain the many things that you do. So straight away, over to you, Tom. Please let people know what you're up to.
Great. So thanks for having me on the podcast, Joe. Love
Pleasure.
to support what you're doing. I guess I do several main jobs. My most important job, I think, is running a practice, 7 physios and 3 massage therapists, a private practice in Oxfordshire, based predominantly on one site, in a big commercial gym space where we have treatment rooms and a pool and different things. Really nice facility. Then we also have an FCP service provision across 3 different GP surgeries. We have contracts with 3 different GP surgeries within the county. So we are like a really small, medium-sized operation, I guess, all based in one county. And I do 3 to 4 days clinical and the rest non-clinical. Most of that is managing those 2 main operations. And then I have a little bit of other stuff that takes up a very small amount of my time, like teaching. I do a little bit of visitor teaching, lecturing on the Oxford Brookes physio courses. I do a bit of teaching for the GP trainees in Oxfordshire. That's the Oxford Deanery, so up at the John Radcliffe Hospital in Oxfordshire. And that's basically teaching the doctors who are becoming GPs. They go through a 3-year training program. And I teach them on time-limited MSK assessments in primary care. I do a little bit of teaching on other topics. I've done some lecturing on ACL injury prevention at the British Orthopaedic Association and the Kids Knee Conference, which is a nice big international conference. It's great fun. And that's in my role as a trustee of a charity called Power Up to Play, which was launched about 4 years ago with myself and a bunch of other clinicians, orthopods and sports medic doctors in Oxfordshire, and that now is a national organisation. We've got a bunch of different physios who are volunteers and ambassadors on that programme, which is all about preventing ACL injuries in the younger population.
Okay.
So that's all the different hats.
Quite a lot of hats. And from our conversation when we met in the summer, Tom, I know that there's quite a lot going on personally as well. You're a dad of young kids, aren't you? And there was a house move being mentioned. I don't know if anything else has been added to that personal list since we met, but fair to say there's quite a lot going on.
There's a lot.
Yeah. And although it's a lot, there's probably people listening with similar stories. And I think physio is one of those professions, isn't it, where it's quite easy to add lots of different strands in and keep adding and keep adding. Um, Probably because we love all the things we do, but you can end up with quite an extensive portfolio. So, Tom, how does all that relate to your well-being, positively or negatively? The fact that you do all these different things.
I don't think I've ever chosen to do lots of things for the sake of doing lots of things.
Mm,
And I think the trap of falling into a presented opportunity and therefore just taking a presented opportunity that comes up, someone emails you, someone calls you and says, "Oh, this is a cool idea. Should we do this?" Um, it is something that is a real danger for certain people. I'm certainly a bit of a yes man and an over optimist, and
mm,
most entrepreneurs are optimists. Otherwise, you would never do it. But I think that is a danger that I'm cognizant of, and I'm always on the lookout for to think, okay, is this something that is the right thing to be doing? So what's been a real help for me is you'll like to hear this, Joe, is some coaching. Uh,
yay.
because stripping things back to why do you do what you do? But also business mentorship has been good for me because I've been able to then think, what is the strategy longer term,
Mm,
medium term, and do the things that we're thinking to get involved in fulfill a specific need, either for the business or for the individuals in that business.
mm,
So that's really helped me from avoid the pitfalls of just going, yeah, this is cool, let's do another thing,
mm,
because I really don't buy into that at all. Unless it's serving a purpose, either financially from a business perspective, or it's fulfilling a need which we as humans or individuals have, then you should not be doing it.
yeah.
And I know that's probably a bit rich coming from someone who's doing clearly loads of things. But when I sit back and look at each of those individual things, I can give you an example.
Mm,
Uh, I feel that then they need to be adding something. Um, for example, with the FCP services, if we hadn't have set those up pre-COVID, I think we would have possibly gone bankrupt in COVID.
mm,
So we have contractual obligations to fulfill, and whether or not the services were being made use of or not, whether patients were filling the list or not, we had a financial income, a baseline income, which was coming in at the end of the month, regardless. And as
mm,
it's delivered on our side of the contract, so sending in our clinicians on these set days, then we were able to then secure ourselves a baseline income, which in the time since then has given us a buffer to manage financial risk and financial insecurity,
mm,
which has meant that we thought, right, well, even though per hour of physical activity time or business time, it doesn't earn as much as you would do if you were running a busy clinic. It's still
mm,
a reason to be doing it. So that's a business reason. And then, for example, let's take the teaching. Why would I be involved in teaching? It's not exactly the highest paid activity that one could find if you're looking at it purely from a financial perspective. But I don't see it that way. It is something that I've always enjoyed doing, even from when I was a third year student and teaching the first years, or one of my younger siblings with their maths homework. I've always loved it. And I considered very closely whether to go straight into teaching after I qualified and then decided against doing that. But it's always been something that's been in the back of my mind, is a passion for doing something that really gives me value. And I think, wow, I really enjoyed having that receptivity and the feedback from the people I've been teaching.
mm,
It gives me something here on the inside that lifts one, I think. And we've all got different attributes and different things that give us value in our professional lives. And that's something that has added value for me.
yeah. So there's another strand to your filters there. I think I've heard, you talked about things that are financially a good idea, things that benefit the people that work for you or the business itself. And then there's this aspect of, does it fulfill you? Does it give you enjoyment outside of the financial aspect? And obviously there's this sweet spot sometimes where we find the things that fit all of those three, isn't there? But yeah, I think that last one's really important. And I remember when we spoke in the summer, Tom, um, then you were talking about various things you're up to, and an obvious, very simple, straightforward coaching question from me was why are you doing all of this? And I do remember your answer very clearly, and I'd love it if you share what you said to me when I asked you that.
Yeah, good question. I know I'm struggling to remember now what I said, but I'm sure it was something along the lines of uh, I was in the NHS for 7 years. In a very my last role was a really dynamic team who I
Mm,
loved spending time with in an orthopedic hospital. So I remember asking myself, like, why would I want to leave that? And it was something I wrestled over. And it was eventually my wife that gave me the kick to take a plunge into something unknown. And at the time, I don't think I saw it very clearly. Um, if I'm perfectly honest, it came down to financial reasons. So my wife was on maternity leave at the time with an American company doing accounts, some accounts role, and we'd had our first baby, and we didn't really have quite enough to meet the mortgage and the payments that we needed. And I was doing private work on the side, and it led to one thing after another. So it was a financial decision, and
mm,
you could say my big raison d'etre at that point was I need to provide for my new baby and for
mm.
my little
Totally, I
family.
remember those days
You
very
remember, I
clearly.
mean, it's a very sort of like suddenly you become very
Yeah.
much awakened, not for what do I enjoy doing. I like doing at work. What do I enjoy doing?
Mm,
Which is what I was thinking to up until that point. Line in the sand. Suddenly it was like, I must provide.
yeah.
And other people have those seminal moments earlier in life. I didn't. It came with me all at once. So that was definitely my reason at the time. But fast forward to today, it's much more nuanced than that, actually. Um, I think almost all of us, the baseline reason is that we need to earn a living. We need to financially support ourselves, of course.
Mm,
But there is a lot more to it than that. And we're lucky enough, many of us, to work in a field or a profession where we get huge opportunities, breadth of opportunities, and a chance for adding meaning, adding value, which you wouldn't get if you were working in another role. And I remember
mm,
thinking the idea of of a nightmare for me as a job, as a career. I remember thinking this very clearly at the age of probably 15, was going and sitting in an office and working all day on a computer and going home. And I didn't care if someone paid me £300,000. I would hate it.
mm,
So um, I think my my purpose, if you like, now after uh, ending up gradually over time in a position where I'm responsible for a medium-sized team, quite a bunch of people with mixed backgrounds and interests, and they have different things that give them value, different things that are important to them. Some of them have children, some of them don't. Some are really career orientated, some are really not.
mm,
Um, and that all means different things for different people. And as much as I've really loved interacting with other human beings who are patients and picking the lock on this individual, we all know what that's like. I still get excited now, which is probably the only reason I still do clinical work. If there's a new patient in the waiting room, I'm kind of excited. I'm going to go and meet with them, bring them in, and unpick this lock. And I still love that
mm.
almost like human psychology element to it.
Yeah.
It still gives me a kick. And if they don't walk out of the room going, I'm so pleased I came today, then I would be disappointed. So
Mm,
I do find kind of getting under the skin of another human being and trying to understand them and build that rapport absolutely fascinating. And so
mm,
as an employer, I've also started to find that really interesting as well. That's
mm,
not to say there aren't challenges. Some days I really think, oh gosh, you know, we've got two, three different people with different challenges, and I'm not quite sure how to solve them, and I'm not sure how this is going to go into the future. Of course, you get days like that. I'm not going to pretend it's all rosy, but on the flip side, where you feel like you've brought the right sort of person in and you started to build a team that fire off each other. So we
Mm.
have a WhatsApp group in our team, for example, and I sit back and I often don't comment because I'm fascinated to see how they interact with each other. And one
Mm.
person who's much better placed than I am to help with a particular query or an issue, then you start to see this sort of, you've built something
Yeah.
that is organically now running on its own gas. And that is like, wow, okay,
Mm. Mm.
this is cool. Like, I never envisaged that.
And
Um,
that's such a good skill as a business owner and a physio. In fact, I think to know the point at which to step back and let the thing breathe, whatever it is. Don't mean to call your people that work for your thing, but that ecosystem that you've built, to let it breathe and grow of its own, out of its own momentum. I think
yeah,
that is a skill set to know that moment. And to trust yourself to step away. I think it's one of the hardest things, isn't it? Well, again, as a patient and a physio, to just, or as a parent, to step back and uh, trust that that person, that group of people, that business will be able to sustain and grow without your constant input.
yeah. I think the phrase that comes back to me often is uh, talking about giving other people responsibility or freedom.
Mm.
Is that delegation is not abdication.
Mm.
So just saying, oh, you get on with it, and then providing no sounding board or feedback point or follow up or critique or support is bad management. And I don't
Mm.
profess to be the best manager. In fact, my my goal is always to try and get someone who's a better manager in to do the managing, and then I can focus on the entrepreneurship. And that I still have as a goal and something that's important to me going forwards. But I feel that there are two key um, things that sit with me that are my job. One is to enable environment where people can thrive.
Yeah.
So that's what they're doing outside work, what their day-to-day work setup is, what their career progression is like, um, areas that interest them in terms of their caseload, extra skills that they want to bring on board. So that's enabling them to thrive. And then also when, pardon the phrase, when the shit hits the fan and something goes badly wrong, how I react and how I manage and handle people
Mm.
is another critical point. And it says everything about me. And I feel that they're the moments in which people talk about culture in an organization. When things go wrong, I think you prove the culture through how you act. I don't think it's necessarily a bunch of phrases up on a wall.
Mm.
I think it's when things go wrong, people find out what you're about,
Yeah.
and then they learn that, okay, that's how we do things. And actually, then they pay it forward often.
Mm.
And if they're responsible for some people or they're dealing with a colleague, it's amazing. I've seen that with our team. So I can't say I've done everything right. I certainly haven't. But trying to foster that this is how we deal with people when they're in difficult times. This is how
Mm.
we handle them. Uh, like the last 2 years or so, when someone has found out that one of the colleagues has had a difficult issue or something's happened in the background, um, the amount of times they'd organize a whip round and they would all donate some
Really?
money and then we'll go and
Wow.
get a present and they'll give it to them or they'll give them a card.
Yeah.
And I've had nothing to do with that.
Oh,
Um,
that's great.
and that's really cool. And to see that people look out for each other, it makes you proud. It really does.
And you say, Tom, that you have nothing to do with that, but one thing I do remember you telling me about was your childhood and the environment you grew up in and some of the values that you picked up from your parents and just the world that you inhabited then. Um, by all means, describe as much or as little of that as you want in this on this podcast. But I would say, from what I learned about you then, I would argue that you have had a lot to do with why that happens when the chips are down with people in your clinic.
Yeah, perhaps not by design, maybe more by osmosis, I guess. And a lot of things I think perhaps you don't realize the effect you have on people whilst you are affecting them, if you know what I mean. It's
Yeah.
sometimes subconscious. Um, but maybe you're right. Maybe that isn't an effect of how I've been influenced or the values that have been laid down in me. Um, I had slightly unusual childhood in the sense that I was part of a big family. My parents were probably the most amazing parents you could ever have, and I thought that was the norm. I just
Mm.
thought everyone had awesome parents that they were on the give the whole time. And I went through life and I realized that not everyone is that lucky. I felt that I was very blessed with that.
Mm.
We weren't well off at all. We were actually extremely hard up, I think.
Did you say your parents were teachers?
Both my parents were teachers initially. My mum also. My dad's done lots of different things, and he was unemployed for 6 years
Right.
during the recession in the 90s, and we lived off of very little.
Mm.
Home baked bread, and we were. The salient point is that we were 10 children at home, uh,
Wow. I
and
don't think I need that.
okay, so I was number 4 of 10, which is in itself a highly unusual thing in modern families,
Yeah.
or usual a couple of generations ago. Both my parents were Christians, and that I think affected the environment of the home, and this idea um, to be on the giving side. They both wanted a big family, I think, when they were younger. Neither of them come from big families, but
Mm.
they'd made that decision that that's what they wanted to do.
They achieved
Um,
that aim.
Sorry,
They achieved that aim.
they did. And no, it was just incredible. Like you cannot imagine how cool. Like Christmas in our family at home was just mad. Um, but I think when you see and observe that as a child,
Mm.
it lays down things in you which become your belief system. Um, and we're still a very close family. Some of my siblings are my best friends, and I guess the things that it perhaps did instill in me is this idea that give and you shall receive, which is
Mm.
really important. And I'm actually a practicing Christian as well, so that's
Mm.
affected me hugely.
Yeah.
This principle of uh, if you give to others, it does come back to you 100%.
Yeah.
And
And you reminded me, Tom, of there was another moment in our conversation that I'll perhaps remind you of, because we were talking about you were talking to me about perhaps wanting to look at acquiring other businesses and expanding your clinics. And we got talking about the financial side of it. And you explained to me very clearly, I think I asked you again, why do you want more money? And I don't know if you remember, but you said to me, situations come up. For example, I think you said a friend of mine's daughter is really struggling at the moment, and you know, I'm helping out, and I want to be able to do that without it being a problem. I want to personally be financially stable enough that I can give the time, and if necessary, I can support with funds as well. And I remember smiling and saying, that's why you don't have an issue with earning money. Um, and I didn't mean because it's a really altruistic sounding reason, because it's easy to go, okay, well, of course he doesn't have issues about money because he's talking about a really, really good thing to do with his money. I think what struck me more was that you were crystal clear as to what that would create for you,
mm,
which was essentially space for the things that were important to you. And
mm,
this type of way of being happens to be the thing that's really important to you, but the model still works if the motivations are slightly different. But what was apparent to me was how crystal clear you were about that.
yeah, no, and I think that that's one point, like you mentioned, but there's a second, and those I think are the two fundamental things that get me out of bed in the morning and push and be ambitious and not just sit back and do something that's easy. I mean, um, it, it's an interesting one. I've never seen myself as an entrepreneur, not for one moment. My comfort zone is academia, I think. So if I'd have just gone through the path of least resistance my whole career, I would be a lecturer. And I've got some of my best friends are lecturers, and it's a really fantastic role, and it's something that I naturally would aggregate towards. But I've learned through my professional life that the way to actually amass some extra, some decent capital is to go down the business route. So I've ended up in this almost by accident. But the seminal points that have developed in my mind as to why am I doing this? Why not go and do something that's easier? Why not just stick with one clinic? Why think about acquisition and growth and generating more financial capital? The one is selfish and the other one is less selfish. The first one, and I make no apologies for this, is time. Because if by having things that generate, they're income generating, that aren't attached to how much I do work, I can then free up my time to do other things, spend time with my children, go and do teaching, look at other interesting opportunities, explore things that few people get the chance to do in their working life, travel, etc. Whatever it is, freeing up time gives me the chance to then consider those as a starting point. So that's the one. The second is by having, a good amount of extra capital, the financial means to think creatively and act creatively outside the box. Or, we have a big network, friends, colleagues, people from the church that I go to. My wife's Norwegian, so our friends in Norway. So having that large network means you see needs, you see people come up, and maybe one of my colleagues, a close family member, is going through some serious cancer treatment. So if we could go and buy them a trip or to go on a holiday for a weekend, how cool is that? I mean, there are a few people who get the chance to have that much impact on people's lives, and that's not from some sort of like virtue signaling perspective. You could do it completely secretly, no one has to know. But the small ways where we've been able to do that, and let's say someone's done a whip round and then we match funded it and gone, yep, bam, let's do it. If we didn't have the cash in the bank to do that, we couldn't act in that way quickly and then be like, right, well, we're going to, if you see people in great need, and that occasionally comes over people's lives and you're powerless to act, that's a frustration. And I found that one of the most rewarding things that I've been able to do. And I don't think I have been able to do it much yet, but I really intend to. And that is a massive motivator for me, because I think we get a limited time on this earth, and we really are just stewards for the money that we are borrowing and having temporarily. We can't take it with us. It's not ours, really. I mean, people might find this a bit Christian-y, mumbo jumbo, but it's kind of like, well, it's God's money. I'm borrowing it. I'm looking after it. I've got to be a good steward of what I have, whether that's a lot or a little. And I can't be so wedded to it that if it all disappeared tomorrow, that, my life would fall apart. No, I feel like there's got to be a little bit of natural separation. I'm doing my best. And if I fall on good times, then great. And if I don't, then I find a different path. So for me, I guess my personal faith has influenced that massively. And also, like I said, my family background and seeing how my parents handled other people. And
I'm having, sorry to interrupt you, Tom. I'm having a little bit of an internal battle here, listening to you, and I'm a non-Christian, but so there's a phrase I sometimes use for myself when I'm thinking about, what should I charge for a service, or, how much of my time should I give for this? And I've got into the habit of asking myself, what would I need to charge in order to feel generous? And what I mean is, if I undercharge, am I going to feel resentful? If I give too much of my time for too little, am I just going to feel, not generous about it? Whereas what will put me in a state where I feel, this feels good and I've got more to give. And then I'm thinking, and your understanding of the sentiment would be greater than mine, but then I'm thinking of the notion that actually the poorest, is it in Christianity, is it that it's more virtuous to give when you have nothing? Yeah, that's the internal battle I'm having. Oh no, should I be waiting till I feel generous, or is the true path to feel generous regardless?
Yeah. Well, that's a very interesting question about what price you put and what value you attach to a service. Um, and I don't see that as quite the same question as generosity, if I'm honest.
Mm,
Maybe that's because I don't do coaching or work with people in quite that same way. But when we set up services, we are quite capitalist about it. I'm not going to pretend we're not. We think, right, what is a profit making activity? What is the market rate for that? Are we average in the market in terms of our staff and their knowledge, etc., or are we better? If we're a bit better, then let's bump that price up a bit and make it reflect what the customer is getting. And that is a fairly cut and dry pricing model that we've always stuck by. We don't pretend to be the cheapest. But in terms of, that point about generosity is very interesting. I think what you're referring to, there's a parable about a widow that had like 2 pennies, and she went and donated these 2 pennies, and people were scoffing and saying, "Oh, you're just giving 2 pennies, that's worth nothing." But then Jesus had said to them, he reprimanded them and said, "Look, this person is more worthy because they've got so little and yet they're giving."
mm,
Whereas other people would give loads more than that and they wouldn't even feel it. Whereas if your question is about, is it more virtuous to give when you have little? I think it's harder to give when you have little.
mm,
And we're not a massive conglomerate with big pockets. We're quite a small operation. But I think it's more the principle of saying, well, if you say, well, I'll wait till I've got loads and then I'll give stuff to people or give to whatever it is that's in your mind to do, you will never do it. That's the truth. So action, and I know you can buy into that because you understand these principles, Joe. But I think action is the big thing.
yeah, just doing it, not
No,
judging.
thinking it is
Yeah,
not enough. You've
yeah.
got to take action, and often that hits the wallet, and then you find out like, how much do I actually care?
Mm,
Um, and if I'm really hard up, and I'm like, I can't. Well, can I give like £10?
mm,
No.
mm,
And this is something I've learned through my life, to some degree, is this business of it will never be really fully convenient to give people or donate or whatever. And I'm not saying we should do it just because it's another place. I'm not going to refer too much to the Bible. It's not evangelism. But in another place it says, give God loves a cheerful giver. So rather than giving grudgingly.
That's in
Uh,
the Bible. God loves the cheerful giver.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. So
great.
it says not out of necessity, not grudgingly or out of necessity, for God loves a cheerful giver. So it's been like, right, give it happily. If you're going to give
Yeah.
something, you got to figure out what you can afford, right? Or what's reasonable. Like there's some stuff we don't, well, we can't do that because we haven't got the money to do that, but we could do this and let's support that person. And
We'll
if
do
we
it
talk about
happily.
individuals that we know, let's say staff members, I cannot tell you how much of it's meant, the sentiment of knowing that you have, and they go, wow, you guys have done a whip round, and okay, it's not thousands of pounds, it's a little sum, but what it meant to them was far greater than the sum of the amount
Yes.
they
It
got.
meant you noticed me, you noticed I needed something, and you acted rather than
Yeah,
just, as you say, thought about it. Yeah.
yeah.
I love that. I'm gonna lighten things a little bit, Tom, with a memory of something a physio said to me about her dad once. I'm thinking about you saying we're certainly not the cheapest. So this physio's dad was a builder, And I can't remember why it came up in conversation, but she was telling me, I think maybe we were trying to think up strap lines for the business. And she said her dad, for all his working years, he had this van, and across the top of the van, it said his business name. And then it said, we're not the cheapest and we're certainly not the best. And she said the number of double takes, but it was the best marketing line ever. And people trying to work it out.
Well, they do say in marketing, you need to stand out, don't they? So I mean,
Yeah.
that would cause a few whiplashes.
Oh, so we talked a little bit about the people that work for you, and I'm starting to feel how lucky those people are, Tom. But were you when you think about supporting the people that work with you for you, um, does it bring up memories of you as a younger physio, or do you take them all? You've already said they're individuals with different motivations. How do you manage that sense of responsibility, and what sort of things, other than what you've already mentioned, do you do?
So in managing, like managing
Yeah, so
how
you've
we go
said
about.
you're aware of the needs and the different personalities of the people working for you. Apologies, talking of builders, I've got some building work going on. Is it coming across on
No,
the?
I can't hear it
Oh,
actually.
good, good. Um, yeah, I asked you too many questions in one. So let's start with the first thing I said was, does it bring back memories of things that you wish you'd been supported with when you were coming up through the more junior ranks of being a physio?
Yeah, I think I was a relatively uncomplicated and fairly thick-skinned sort of apprentice in some senses. So I was lucky, I guess, in that sense. Not everyone has it so easy, and I also know that a lot of people suffer with imposter syndrome and a weight of responsibility as a
Mm,
clinician. That's not uncommon, and that's actually not wrong at all. So, um, that's one of the first things we speak to our new starters about when they first join. Um, we set out some ground rules, which is the obvious stuff, as I'm sure you'd appreciate. No such thing as a stupid question. There's an open door policy. You have a responsibility to ask on behalf of other people who may be too worried to ask.
mm,
Um, and so that setting those kind of ground rules, if you like, those principles, we hope to instill that into people and just be like, you're not expected to know everything straight away. In fact, if you did, there'd be something a bit weird going on, because this is supposed to be a profession where you're continuously learning, probably throughout your whole career and developing. And as soon as you stop learning, then we have to ask why, what's going on there. So I often just say to people, look, if you know this much, then that's absolutely fine. And also another principle we talk about is show your strong side to your patients and your weak side to your colleagues.
oh, I love that.
Because we don't need to show each other our strong sides. We can be like, look, I have no idea what I'm doing with this patient. I think it's really healthy, really important. Of course, you can still present a confident front to the patients and instill them with that sense that you know what you're doing. But in terms of feeling safe, feeling confident, feeling happy, our clinical lead, Ed, he says no one should be going home at the end of the day and thinking about their caseload at night or that patient. No one should ever
Mm,
do that. So he's been drumming that into our team and saying, if you are not sure, call me. 9 o'clock at night, call me. So he's a fantastic clinical lead, Ed Brown. And another one where if stuff goes wrong, he's there straight away.
mm,
Um, so he's not on people all the time, but I think that's a really nice management style, just being like, just set some ground rules. So that's
mm,
one thing. The other thing, in terms of how to manage people, I'll tell you what, I've been learning that, and I'm still learning that all the time. And I can't say I feel like I get it right all the time, Joe. But one thing I have learned is through experiences of being managed by other people, both good and bad, has really
mm,
taught me a lot through my junior years. One was a really painful experience where for about a year and a half I was managed in an NHS role by a woman with probably a personality disorder. Um, and she was extremely micromanaging, extremely aggressive if anything went wrong, almost like she was panicking that it would come back on her desk somehow. And you got that feeling of her being completely suffocated, brought into her office, and then almost going out in tears again because you felt like you were being being hauled across the coals, so that you didn't really realize that you'd done wrong. So experiencing those extremes, and that is quite an extreme case, I think then teaches you the case of going, oh, hang on, most people are insecure. Most people are needing twice as much positive reinforcement as they are critique. And I didn't appreciate that, I think, for many years, because I am quite a naturally confident person, and that's not my fault. That's the way I'm made. And I'm not saying that's an advantage all the time either. I got marked down on my first placement because they said, oh, you're just too confident, and we just don't like that. You're not asking the questions. and a massive personality clash with this quiet, mousy physio who was my supervisor. And I was completely unaware of what the vibe I was giving across. And I had to learn that. So I was like, okay, so you're a slightly overbearing, slightly confident personality. Be conscious and aware of the other people. Most people aren't like that. So you learn this about yourself and how the image you portray as well. So I guess having bad experiences has taught me what not to do, and taught me that you have to handle people with real care and sensitivity. Everyone. Doesn't matter if they're coming across in a confident way or not. Underneath the surface, most people are insecure a little bit and needing a lot of positive reinforcement. Even people who've been physios for 30 odd years, I don't care. Everyone needs to be complimented, told when they're doing a good job. And the other thing is, I was at the Nuffield Orthopaedic Centre for quite a few years, which is in Oxfordshire. It's a big sort of orthopaedic department.
I work there. I know it well.
You did, of course you did. So Colette Tracy was the manager there, and I thought she was absolutely fantastic. She wasn't your best mate. She never tried to be. She kept professional distance, which I respected, but she was warm, and she always had your back. When I went on paternity leave, for example, she called me up. She always had your back, and she focused on accountability. So we had clinical reasoning sessions once a week, and she would quiz you, query stuff. And it was a bit sort of uncomfortable, I'm not going to lie. But it was a bit like, no, you need to learn this. And she didn't apologize for setting high standards. So she set high standards, she backed them up, but she created an environment which was warm and it was supportive. You felt like she wanted you to succeed. And as a manager, if you can give people the sense that you want them to succeed, you want them to thrive, you want them to go places, I think it allows you to more room to then say, well, no, you didn't do that right, and that needs to be better. More, because right in their gut, they feel like this person wants my best, and they want me to do well.
Yeah, and Colette, if you happen to be listening, then thank you from me too. I think I was probably in your care, Colette, at a time where I was less up together than Tom. I was a very junior physio when I was with Colette.
I really don't think so.
I remember how tolerant she was of my slightly random existence in my early 20s, and she was great. And like you, Tom, I just remember as this really. I remember her as a very steady influence. I remember her slightly quizzical looks when she clearly thought, what the hell is this girl up to now? But yeah, so supportive and just the real steadiness that I needed at that time. So thank you, Colette, if you're listening. I don't think I ever got a chance to thank you.
One conversation I need to share is that she surprised me. So I get a lot of stick when I left from the whole team. It was unexpected. I was leaving to go into the private practice and freelance, and they were shocked. They were absolutely shocked. They thought I'd be here. I was talking about masters and going to specialist role, and my supervisor at the time, Simon, he bought me a helium balloon that had Darth Vader on it. In that I was going over to the dark side.
The dark side, yeah.
And it was a hoo-ha. But Colette took me into her office and she said, I think you're doing the right thing. and I think this will give you loads of opportunities, and I think I want to give you my blessing and say, you're going to do great. So I suddenly thought, the weight was lifted off my shoulders, and guilt and all that sort of stuff
Being
from
given
leaving the
permission.
NHS. And she really helped me and sent me on my way with full backing, and talked a bit about an experience that she'd had where she could have gone down the same route, and if she'd had her time again, she might have done that as well. So I was like, okay, if this is good enough for Colette, then maybe it's good enough for me. And that suddenly just made me a whole lot happier about it. She probably doesn't remember that conversation, but it laid down something in me. And I think it's important to remember this as managers. We're in a position of authority, and sometimes these conversations which we think don't matter, they actually are pretty foundational for people.
Yeah. Well, listen, Tom, time's ticking on. I'm going to draw the conversation to a close, but as I do, I'm going to take a page out of your book and the positive reinforcement page, because the more I hear about what you do, Tom, and how you do it, then I think I want to congratulate you and say, I think you're going about things in an amazing way, and talking about it in this way. Possibly you might underestimate, I think, the value of other people running businesses, thinking of setting up businesses, existing in businesses or NHS organisations. The more we talk about what good leadership, good people management, good self-management is, the better. And I really want to congratulate you for what you're doing in your physio world and the rest of your world.
Thank you, Jo. I really appreciate that.
Thank you so much for being a guest. I really appreciate your time, Tom.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Take care. Talk soon.
I'll see you in a few weeks. Bye for now.
Bye. So I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I said we covered a lot of ground, from clinic management to Christianity. I really enjoyed it, and I genuinely meant what I said at the end. I really admire what Tom's doing in the world, or perhaps more what Tom is being in the world, and I really appreciate his willingness to talk about that. Let me know what you thought. Tell me which bits you identified with. Tell me if your experiences of working for people or managing people are similar or different. Let me know what you thought. So whichever side of those various fences you sit on, I am sure if you're a clinician that you are giving in many spheres of your life all day, every day. And as I always say, please do not forget yourself in that little ecosystem, because just like all the other people, you definitely matter.
Here at Physio Matters, we think physio matters. Become a member today and access the biggest MSK library on the planet. Access at home, work or in the gym to make sure your CPD conditioning is elite. physio-matters.com. More content than will fit on a deadlift bar.